Thank you for participating in this module, Tips for PBIS Teams. I'm Denise Forehand, and with me today is Laura McMahon, and we are PBIS coaches for the school division. We always begin with a shared understanding of what positive behavioral intervention and supports is in Virginia Beach. Anchored to Goal 2 within our strategic framework, PBIS focuses on the goal of student well-being. PBIS is a data-informed decision-making framework for establishing the social, cultural, and behavioral and academic supports needed for a school to be an effective learning environment for all students. We continue to ask, how can we use data within our team meetings to inform future support? Every goal within the strategic framework has an embedded equity emphasis. Within Goal 2, we are focused on engaging in culturally responsive practices division-wide. We identify and address inequalities in discipline practices by investigating and implementing best practices and seek innovative solutions. Through PBIS, BBCPS has a desire to move towards equitable discipline and foster positive school climate. Through the use of a tiered framework, PBIS provides support for all at the Tier 1 level, some at the Tier 2 level, and a few at the Tier 3 level. Tier 1 involves several core components or supports: relationship and community building, common language of expectations, consistent structure and routines, student engagement, pro-social behavior acknowledgement, and effective responses to inappropriate behavior. Our learning intentions for today: we will consider the value of team meeting structures and processes, reflect on team beliefs, membership, roles, and planning within the PBIS team meeting process. And we'll consider team goals and strengthen our data-informed decision-making process. We measure PBIS implementation using the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI. Each spring, PBIS coaches support Tier 1 teams to assess implementation using the TFI. The TFI includes 15 features, which are divided into 3 sections: teaming, implementation, and evaluation. For today's learning, we'll focus on teaming as reflected in the first 2 features: 1.1, team composition, and 1.2, team operating procedures, while also highlighting the database decision-making process as reflected in TFI features 1.12, discipline data, and 1.13, database decision-making. Throughout, we'll look at how ongoing two-way communication plays an important role in implementation. Why this focus on the teaming process? Our division TFI data revealed that strength in teaming and database decision-making increases the likelihood of overall successful implementation and sustainability of PBIS. TFI feature 1.1 is all about team composition. The Tier 1 team includes a Tier 1 systems coordinator or team lead, a school administrator, a family member, and individuals able to provide applied behavioral expertise, coaching expertise, knowledge of student academic and behavior patterns, and knowledge about the operations of the school across grade levels and programs. And for high schools, we want student representation. The rubric uses a 3-point scale. Take a moment to read the descriptions of 2, 1, and 0 on the right side of the slide. School PBIS Tier 1 teams not only include stakeholders as team members, but also actively elicit ownership, voice, and broad representation of their families and communities, especially underserved families and cultures. Students and families should have opportunities to see themselves, their cultural values, and their histories in the school setting. Although teams should be small enough to be efficient, family voice is critical. If team size is a concern, consider the use of subcommittee structures and have families represented on the subcommittee. For example, quarterly, family members may be invited to the PBIS team meeting where they are present with the whole team during the beginning or ending of the meeting to collaborate with one or two PBIS team members on topics to be determined. TFI feature 1.2 is team operating procedures. The Tier 1 team meets at least monthly and has a regular meeting format and agenda, minutes, defined meeting rules, and a current action plan. Take a moment to read the descriptions of 2, 1, and 0 on the right side of the screen. Team procedures include structures and practices that prompt the use of data for decision-making and communication to ensure transparency of the system and to enable all stakeholders to have a voice and agency in the process and outcome. For example, a PBIS team member, such as the administrator, may meet with the Student Advisory Committee quarterly to gain student feedback on the 4 core features of Tier 1 implementation. This feedback is shared and used by the team to better guide implementation. An ongoing two-way communication loop ensures everyone's voice is not only heard, but acted upon as appropriate. Many teams have a process in place where team members take information back to their departments or grade levels to gain feedback, and then they bring it back to the team. Consider using a process in which staff are able to suggest or submit agenda items to the team in an open format. For example, a staff member may share a concern over a lack of consistency with expectations across the building and might suggest that this be an item for the team to address at the next PBIS meeting. As you view this video, consider similarities and differences between the structures and practices depicted here and those within your team. What structures and practices are in place and running smoothly, and which ones could use some strengthening?
Not run by the administrator, it is run by the entire school. However, in order to make this practical, a PBIS team is created within the school. The PBIS team does not run PBIS, it acts as a representative body in the school to facilitate communication and action in a simple but comprehensive manner. Ideally, the PBIS team includes persons that represent all the stakeholder groups in the school. One way to think about this is to consider whether every adult in the school can look at the team and point to a person that represents him or her. This representation is crucial in terms of getting buy-in and consistent implementation. PBIS teams typically meet monthly to look at data and evaluate where changes are necessary. Module 6 in this series describes the process of data collection, but here we're looking at the uses of this data in 3 key ways at each meeting. The first is to evaluate progress towards school goals. For example, a school may have developed a general goal of reducing suspensions or a more specific goal of reducing discipline referrals from the cafeteria. In either case, the team looks at the data available to evaluate progress. If progress is adequate, this success is reported back to the full faculty and staff to reinforce continued use of those prevention strategies and keep them in place. The second key is to look generally at discipline data in an attempt to see any new trends. Sometimes in the middle of the year, a new hotspot or new problem behavior or new problem condition pops up. By looking at the data each month, the team can get out ahead of these problems and confer back with the faculty and staff with regard to simple prevention solutions. Finally, the team should look for students whose behaviors indicate that prevention efforts are not working. That is, they look to identify students in need of further support. For example, the team may designate a criterion for number of discipline reports necessary to prompt further assessment. As a general rule of thumb, the criterion for such identification should identify 15 to 20% of the school's population. Not all of these students will require attention at an elevated tier, but all deserve a closer look to better understand the predictability of their behavior.
Structures and practices. People aren't tired from solving problems. They are tired from solving the same problems over and over. Meetings can sometimes feel unproductive if they are not structured. The structure and purpose of meetings lays the foundation for efficiency and effectiveness. School PBIS teams are better able to increase their efficiency and effectiveness during meetings by consistently using structures and practices. One practice that has helped teams make the most out of their meetings is the TIPS process, Team-Initiated Problem Solving. TIPS is a clear model with steps for problem solving. It provides a framework to use during meetings focusing on data-based decision-making to improve student outcomes. It is a formal process that a group of people can use to build and implement solutions. The meeting structure and process is streamlined, leading to a greater productivity and increased outcomes for students and staff. Part of the TIPS process involves a team meeting and the recording of important information. Take a moment to review the components of the meeting agenda. This form has been provided to each team, loaded within PBIS team Google Drives. And prior to the meeting, we need to identify who will be responsible for bringing the data, who will be responsible for showing the data in monthly meetings, and what data will be reviewed. Ensure each month that a current action plan is located on the minutes form. Here we've listed some of the core roles and key participants at PBIS team meetings. The core roles are team lead or facilitator, data analysis, and minute taker. The administrator is a key participant in each meeting as he or she offers valuable insight, feedback, and ultimately the authority for certain types of decisions. The team may be stalled from moving forward in the problem-solving process when an administrator is not present. Student voice represented at team meetings is important. Some schools have developed separate student teams using a PBIS team member as their sponsor. Either the sponsor or the student, or both, communicate information and feedback between the teams. One of the primary tasks for the PBIS Tier 1 team to accomplish is to decide upon or revise the team's norms or agreements together. Take a moment to read through some sample norms. Norms are shared agreements about how a group will work together. They help us answer questions such as, how will we treat one another? How will we engage with challenging content? What will we do if we disagree? A quick review of the team norms at each meeting sets the tone and helps to provide an overall focus. To enhance your understanding, we've provided an article that will help demonstrate the power of team norms and spawn ideas for not only developing equitable norms, but sustaining them. A quote from the article reads, "We will only make meaningful improvements in teaching and learning for all students if we bring in everyone's perspectives and hear voices that historically have been less audible and even silenced." The article, "The Power of Team Norms," is located within the resources of this module.
In addition to reviewing team norms at each meeting, a check-in or celebration could also be a standard practice. Options for check-in ideas are listed on this slide. Another structure to keep in mind is, how will teams gain feedback from school staff, particularly their beliefs about behavior? Beliefs inform practices and responses to behavior and will likely influence the assumptions school staff might have about PBIS. How can teams leverage the beliefs of school staff to move the work forward? This Four Corners activity is a valuable way for PBIS teams to engage school staff in these important conversations. For this activity, staff are asked to share the number which corresponds to the belief statement that resonates strongest with them, or they can create their own belief statement. It's important for teams to revisit their school-wide vision or goal and to have this front and center for every team meeting. This also guides current goals, data to be used, and outcomes to be measured. We continue to ask, how can data be used within team meetings to inform future support? TFI feature 1.12 is discipline data. The Tier 1 team has instantaneous access to graph reports summarizing detailed discipline data organized by the type of problem behavior, the frequency, location, time of day, and by individual student. Take a moment to read the description of a 0, 1, or 2 on the rubric on the right side of the screen. TFI feature 1.13 is database decision-making. The Tier 1 team reviews and uses discipline data and academic outcome data at least monthly for decision-making. Pause to read the description of 0, 1, and 2 on the rubric on the right side of your screen. It's important that teams regularly disaggregate their discipline data as an effective and objective way to assess and monitor equity in student outcomes. When concerning patterns are noted, teams develop action plans with short-term and long-term solutions. Teams engage in active database decision-making with a specific focus on equity. Inequitable outcomes are first examined from a system perspective before considering individual behavior support. The PBIS division coaching team created a guide for teams to use to respond to discipline disproportionality based on the PBIS Cultural Responsiveness Field Guide from pbis.org. Please see your coach for more information. The role of the PBIS team is critical as it functions as a data-informed decision-making team and responds to each school's unique needs for staff, students, and families. What data is needed in order to address identified goals? How will those goals inform the systems teams develop to support staff and the practices staff utilize to support students and families? A tool that can help teams determine their vision, goals, and action steps was developed and shared with school leaders. Read the options for some data sources listed here. What other forms of data can your team use to determine outcomes? What are the outcomes your team is hoping to achieve? The link to this document is provided in the resource section of this module. TIPS uses a 4-step problem-solving approach. The first step is to identify and review the data. The data is used to progress monitor throughout the year and to create precision statements to be brought to the team meeting. The data typically answers questions such as, what is the problem? Where is it occurring? When is it occurring? Who is involved? And finally, why is it happening? Step number 2, based on the data, the team determines a target goal. The goal should follow the SMART goal format and be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Here are some sample short-term and long-term goals schools have developed based on their data. Teams are encouraged to use this document to help in the development of specific goals. Pause the webinar to review the data sources and goals. Consider how they might align with your school's goals. Step number 3, how will we support students? This is where the team begins to problem solve and action plan. The plan usually involves one or more components listed here, such as prevent, teach, reinforce, extinguish, correct, and safety. Problems don't usually require all listed solutions implemented concurrently to affect change. Utilizing the first 3 solutions, prevent, teach, and acknowledge, usually helps to decrease the problem. This information is used to develop the action plan. A key consideration in the action planning process is how will we collect and use data for progress monitoring and evaluation? We may be familiar with prevent, teach, acknowledge, but extinguish may not be as familiar. We want to make sure we're not unknowingly reinforcing the behavior we don't want to see. For example, If the procedure for students who arrive late to school involves reporting to the tardy window to obtain a pass, and the function of their late behavior is to avoid going to first block, are we rewarding them by having to wait 20 minutes at the tardy window? Step number 4, what will we do to support staff? For instance, what professional learning and/or coaching do staff need? How will we share important information with our staff? Is there a communication plan between the administration, PBIS team, and staff? Is there a procedure in place for staff to request assistance? How will we know what they need? We want to share a few suggested steps for PBIS teams and school leaders serving on those teams. Though we have identified several target areas within the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI, we want to think about how the team can best support your building's current needs and goals. To help direct our planning, consider the following. First, re-examine team membership and roles. Who will take on which roles? Next, review relevant feedback and data as a team to assess the needs and goals for staff and student support throughout the school year. How will we support our school's goals? How will we plan for and deliver training for our staff? Finally, how will we involve students and families as critical members of our team? The PBIS Division Coaching Team has developed a Stakeholder Voice Handbook to help guide this process. Please see your coach for more information. Thank you for participating in today's learning. If you have specific questions, please reach out to your school's PBIS team.